Funding for this program is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.
Hello, I'm Dan Hoffman, host of Farm Connections at KSMQ. We have a great topic and a great panel today to talk about the case for rural living. Benya Kraus, hello.
Hi.
Tim Penny, hello and welcome.
Bet, good to be with you.
John Garry, hello.
Dan.
Well, certainly these are interesting times, and this panel is going to tell us a little bit about affordable and delightful rural living. Benya, just give us a little background on yourself, please.
Yeah. Hi, great to be with you. I am living in Waseca, Minnesota. It is the community where my dad's side of the family has about 6 generations of roots strong here, but I was actually born in Bangkok, Thailand. So my dad grew up as one of 9 on our family farm and ended up doing public health work for his career. And so met my mom in Thailand, and I was born there. I went to school out for college out in Boston, and then ended up founding an organization called Lead for America that helps young people return back to their hometowns. And so in my roundabout way, was able to get my own self back to my family's hometown, and now get to be surrounded by a few of my what would be 53 first cousins on my dad's side. So glad to be home.
Welcome back to your roots.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Tim, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your involvement with rural living?
Sure. Well, I'll pick up on the word roots because my family goes back 5 generations here in Southern Minnesota. My great-great-grandfather homesteaded northwest of Elbert Lee, near a town known as Freeborn, and on the edge of a lake now known as Penny Lake. So I had the honor, having grown up on a family farm and gone to a 2-room country school, graduated with a class of 39 from Keister High School, to really get rooted in rural Minnesota, and then had the honor of representing this area both in the state Senate and in Congress, and now as president of the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, which serves a 20-county region as a community and economic development foundation. So I'm a champion for rural, and I think that there are great prospects for an even brighter future for rural Minnesota in the coming years.
Thank you, Tim. John?
Yeah, Dan, I actually was born in Northfield, Minnesota, so I'm new to Austin. I moved here when I was 2 and grew up in Austin, graduated from Pacelli High School in Austin in the 1980s, and then went on quite a tour of St. Thomas for college in the Twin Cities, taught at a high school in New York City, lived in Washington, D.C., spent some time in Rome, came back to Minneapolis in the Twin Cities, came back to Austin. So about a 20-year tour there. And when it was time to start a family, that's when we decided to come back to Austin. And right now I'm the president of the Development Corporation of Austin, which is the economic development organization that serves the Austin area.
Thank you. Great introductions, and what a wonderful, wonderful background each of you have. Makes you very qualified for the discussion we have today, the case for rural living. Tim, why does rural living matter?
Well, first and foremost, there's a quality of life to rural living. It's as someone that spent part of my life in the Washington, D.C. suburbs, it's an awful lot different to be in that setting. I know that my wife, Barb, she passed away now 16 years ago, but she was interviewed by newspaper reporters back during my time in Congress, and she would often reflect on the huge difference between suburban life in the Washington area and everyday life here in Southern Minnesota. And one of the big reasons we came home from Washington after 12 years was to get my kids back to Minnesota before they forgot that they were Minnesotans, but to get back to small town life. And we lived in Waseca for a number of years and allowed our kids to go to school there, a high quality education, and experience that small town life. The other thing is that, I asked the Rural Policy Center to do a study on the cost of living in rural a year and a half ago. And the study came back with results that I actually anticipated. What they learned is that in almost any profession, whether it's technical vocational jobs or professional jobs, accountancy, law, whatever it might be, you could actually and usually would make a little bit less in rural Minnesota, but the cost of living when you consider taxes and housing and childcare and other issues means that you're actually money ahead at the end of the month in living in rural. So there's a cost of living advantage to rural in addition to that quality of life.
Thank you. John, why does rural living matter?
I've got a lot of ideas on that, Dan, but a couple of the things that I think I've noticed over the past few years is the proximity we have to each other in a small town. It's kind of funny that, you think of a big city and you think of increased density, but the bumping into each other doesn't seem to happen. The real life bumping into each other, the neat collisions and coincidences. And I think in my own case, I feel a lot more human and who I am in a small town because of that, because when I go to the grocery store, I'm very likely to run into 5 people I know, or maybe 20. And I think that brings out that human interaction, makes us, I think it builds integrity for all of us, in that we have to take others into consideration, that sense of commonality and the common good. It's right there for us, maybe a little bit more than in a big city. That's the first thought that comes to my mind for me, Dan.
Well said.
Yeah.
Benya?
Yeah, I'm going to riff off of that too, John. I think there is a popular cultural expectation that to live a good life is one in which your individual gains are maximized, and that is the focal point. I know I graduated at a school in which, I did public service work all throughout my 4 years of college, and a lot of my peers did the same. But when it came time for graduation, there was this expectation that if you did well in school, that if you had a successful future ahead of you, you would end up in a handful of cities and a handful of firms. And I think then the narrative was that the most cutting edge challenges are only being solved and in meaningful ways in this corner office here. And I felt personally that wasn't right. But when you look at also the larger scale of the fact that 2/3 of college educated millennials end up living in just 50 cities alone, I also think, what does that mean for the future of our country, the vibrancy of our economy as a whole, the importance of our rural communities and agricultural sectors, and diversifying our economy to make sure that there is distributed leadership all across the country. When I could also think of, that those larger stats and how my life and what I could offer to a place or to a people or to our country could actually, in some ways, be more meaningful in my rural community, I think that also fuels the sense of purpose that I think a lot of people my generation are looking for. And to give a very real, tangible example, our organization works with young people who are moving and working on critical challenges facing rural all across the country. And the place that I'm in right now actually is this beautiful old building that was the former, actually it used to be a KFC building at one point, then became the First National Bank building. My grandpa and great grandpa actually had meetings downstairs in the basement. And over generations, the current owners here have totally transformed this place to now be a co-working space on this main level. Right across the hall is a bar and a really fun, chic place. Downstairs is an event space that they've turned the basement that actually has, where the bank would keep all the money in the vaults. Those are also program spaces. And upstairs there's a photography studio. And then I also live in the apartments upstairs too. So every square inch of this old building has been rehabbed and turned into new life. And I think it also speaks to the case of rural living that two amazing young women can come together and say, we want to build this space for our community, and have their creative visions come to life in a way that the whole community rallies around them and supports. And in many ways, I think my own creative vision is realized here in my community because of the proximity of neighbors, and also I think the incredible opportunity that is rural.
Tell us just a little more about how your organization helps rural communities.
Yeah, so we, one of our cornerstone programs that we run a paid fellowship program that brings recent college graduates. Some are immediately graduating, others are in their late 20s, early 30s, that are seeking an opportunity to either return to a place that they care a lot about, but just haven't seen that opportunity. Or sometimes they answer, I would have moved back here if they had X, Y, and Z. And we recruit, train, and connect them to a whole national network of other fellows that are committing to return home and do the same. Or sometimes people who are wanting to serve their state and might be coming from an urban area, but care a lot about the issues facing rural. And so we kind of play this matchmaking role in which we can work with an organization that has a dynamic leader, that has a very big vision for change for their community. But I think in a lot of places realize that, they also are sitting on 6 different other boards, part of 3 different organizations, and have this vision that they oftentimes just don't have the number of hours in a day to be able to complete. So we pair those local visionaries with this next generation of leaders who are seeking the desire to also make a difference, and put them into those change-making roles, both to help the organization and the community, and also to grow the leadership of this next generation and connect them with this larger sense of purpose and community that hopes to redefine that actual, cultural success can also mean committing to places and committing to people.
Sounds very impactful. And using some mentorships, perhaps?
Oh yeah. I think that's the cornerstone of success, when, and I'm going to look at Tim because he's actually, his organization, one of our fellows, is in many ways a success story. We had a fellow who grew up in the Twin Cities, but was interested in rural, and ended up serving with Tim's organization, Smith, connecting entrepreneurs all across the Southern region, and is now hired full-time at Smith and is living in Northfield. So I think has seen the case herself for the draws of rural living.
No. In Benya's case, she returned to rural in a sense because her father was from here. In the case of Maddie Fisher, who now works for us, we brought her to rural. She chose rural, and we're delighted to have her on board. And true to the mission of Benya's organization, Lead for Minnesota, this is about bringing young people to rural communities to help them add their spark and their energy and their enthusiasm to causes and programs and activities that matter to the future of these communities. And we hired Maddie as a Lead for Minnesota fellow to help us do a better job of outreach to new immigrant and minority communities in Southern Minnesota, to make sure that our resources in community and economic development were reaching them in a fair and balanced way. And she did a phenomenal job, so well that we hired her away from Lead for Minnesota and put her on our payroll.
You still seem like you're friendly to each other about that, so we appreciate that. And thank you, Tim. Benya, can you give us a website where our audience can go and learn more about your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can check out the whole national network of it at www.lead4america.org. And you'll also be able to learn about Lead for Minnesota on that page, or you can go directly to www.leadforminnesota.org.
Awesome. Thank you. Tim, perhaps the same from you, Smith's website?
Oh yeah, www.smifoundation.org. So
Thank you.
we're easy to find. If you Google Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, will be the first thing that pops up. That's another way to find us.
And John, the same for you. Maybe
Yeah, we're at Austin, AUSTIN. DCA is the name of my organization, Development Corporation of Austin. So austindca.org or Austin Economic Development, Google would get you to us.
John, why would I want to go there? What do you offer? What's unique about that website? What's unique about your organization? What's unique about Austin and your surrounding communities?
Yeah, Austin is a really interesting place. It's a town of 25,000, and it is the home of a Fortune 500 company. So Hormel Foods has been located here for over 100 years. With that company growing over that time, there's also the Hormel Foundation. Hormel Foundation is not part of Hormel, but it's integrated in a sense that it's a charitable nonprofit that owns a lot of shares of the company. Through the Hormel Foundation, Austin's become a place that has really pretty unique for a rural community, I think, amenities and investments, schools, rec center. In Austin, the Assurance Scholarship, any graduate of Austin High School or Pacelli High School can go to Riverland Community College at no cost, including books. And I think another thing about Austin that maybe would surprise people, but I think you see this increasingly in a lot of rural communities, is the diversity. The Austin that I grew up in is nothing like the Austin of today. We have people here from all over the world. And that, to me, it's just, it makes me feel like I'm getting the best of both worlds. And I think a lot of people in Austin really embrace the diversity, the variety of people that live here. It makes it a much more interesting place, and it's all across the spectrum too, where it's really it's very much newcomers or who are looking to make a living, maybe in a factory, to people who have PhD, MDs, and doing cancer research at the Hormel Institute. Great variety of people.
Well, certainly we remember many times where corporations have been pirated away from Minnesota. So that's a big, important thing for our rural communities and for our state. Tim, your organization really, beyond just a community, looks at the communities in a region in Minnesota. Can you expand on some of the programming and some of the visions that Smith has?
Sure. Well, we came into existence in the middle 1980s, 35 years ago, in what was then called the farm crisis, which was affecting all of rural America. And as we sadly lost so many family farms, we also saw many smaller towns struggle and suffer. And that's the context in which our foundation was created. We were initially funded by the McKnight Foundation, but it's a metro-based foundation. They didn't know a lot about rural, so they wisely allowed each of these rural Minnesota initiative foundations to be locally owned and governed in a sense. We have a local board of directors that define our work. And broadly, community and economic development, investing in the future of this region. But we do that currently in 3 buckets. We have a lot of early childhood programming to support the availability of quality early childhood in communities across this region. We have a lot of economic development work, including some business lending, a student competition for the college campuses in this area to encourage these young entrepreneurial students to build a business and stay in Southern Minnesota. We also have some other training programs focused on entrepreneurs. And then we have some programming that's specific only to the smaller towns, 10,000 and under in our 20 county region. and that includes a grant program, a small town paint program, and we help smaller towns create and maintain community funds. We have 30 of those community funds currently under our umbrella. It allows them to build an endowment, then they have perpetual dollars to invest in whatever matters to the future of those towns. And alongside that, we are urging farm families that may not have an heir to take over their land to consider gifting land to one of these community funds. We would then continue to manage it as if we're a farm manager, but then after taxes and expenses, those annual proceeds could go to the benefit of that community fund, or they could set up a family fund. The goal here is to keep those resources working for the benefit of rural Minnesota.
We have a lot of opportunities. Can you think of some, and specifically in leadership? You know, if you live in downtown Chicago, you may be one of many. In Austin, Minnesota, you're still one of many, but you really stand out and you have an opportunity to lead. What kind of opportunities do you think exist inside of your community for somebody to step forward and maybe help affordable housing, affordable living?
Yeah, there's institutions in town and nonprofit organizations that all have board of directors. And I think, like, for example, I'm on the YMCA board of directors, and that there's always people who come in, they'll maybe do a 3 or 6 year stint and then vacate it. You know, there's space for another person, but that's just one example of a dozen probably. There's also a program called Leadership Austin that Riverland Community College helps run with the Austin Chamber, that has about a cohort each year of about 20 to 25 people. They spend a year learning the community better, but then also at the same time developing their own personal concept of leadership and how that fits together with sort of the best practices in leadership. A great opportunity for people. I know other communities, rural communities, have similar programs. And then, like, for example, Austin HRA is a public entity that has a board, a private citizen portion of their board to get to really keep that connection with the community. Those are a few examples.
Well said, John. And I know you didn't exhaust all of them, but we need to give Benya a chance. Opportunities in your area and through your program.
So here in Waseca, I'm part of a group of local leaders that are coming together to start a community real estate investment fund. So another great organization to lift up in this is Revocity. It's called, you can check them out at www.revocity.com. But it's a really innovative model that essentially allows you to pool together local investment and local capital in partnership with a company that's based out of Northfield called Revocity. They have decades of experience of turning old buildings into exciting new revitalized places. And they do that not just as a grant making program, but actually in a way that helps you deliver financial returns as well to your investors. So imagine me, I am 26 years old and I am about to go into real estate investment. I can tell you that when I was living in my triple decker, paying over $1,000 in monthly rent out in Boston, there were many buildings that I could see needed serious investment, but it was going to have to take several years, decades even, before I could feel like I had the ability to step in and say, let's do something about this. Meanwhile, here in Waseca, with organizations like Revocity, and just the proximity of knowing who your neighbors are and going to, I'm part of my Rotary Club here, and knowing, who are the movers and shakers in the community of people who just put in that extra effort to care about and take ownership over a place. And so together we can come, and we've been meeting weekly for the past 6 or so months to start looking at our own community and say, wow, this has the potential to be something more. And all it takes really, especially with this new mechanism of pulling our capital together, it takes just the love for place and people willing to get together as neighbors and say, let's take the future of our community in our own hands and let's do this. So that's something I'm really excited about.
Excellent. Thank you, Benya. Tim, we've heard John and Benya talk about leveraging their organizations, leveraging the skills, leveraging the energy. How can we use your organization and find more opportunities and put them to use?
Well, we try to stay rooted in the three areas of work that I described earlier: early childhood, entrepreneurship, and small towns. But in each of these areas, we live by our motto of collaborating for regional vitality. We've partnered with Lead for Minnesota. We've partnered with DCA down in Austin. If there are organizations in our region that are engaged in addressing the same issues that we address as a foundation, our model of work is to figure out how to partner with these others, because it leverages more outcome when we partner in that fashion. I always say the sum is always greater than the parts when you collaborate effectively, and that's what we try to do in each of these areas of work. So if you look across the region, those that are involved in early childhood, those that are involved in economic development, they know of our resources, and they know in what circumstances we can supplement or complement what they're trying to do in their community, and that's what we're here for.
Wonderful gifts, stimulating discussion, opportunities that are far exceeding anybody's imagination. Thanks for joining us today on The Case for Rural Living.
Funding for this program is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.